quick introduction. I am Joel Anderson, Director of Risk Consulting for RSM. RSM has been hired by OCIO to help with subrecipient monitoring and grant compliance that is required since this is U.S. Treasury dollars funding NOFA 7. If you guys, we do have questions and answers, and Maggie will be doing that, but I do want to be very upfront with you. This is only regarding NOFA 7. A lot of this information probably could be carried over to NOFA 8, but today's conversation is only NOFA 7, and that is just due to the way OCIO is in their process for reviewing applications and grants from NOFA 8. So if you do have any questions regarding NOFA 8, please still direct that directly to OCIO. But if you have questions about NOFA 7, I will try to answer those today. If I cannot answer those, we will turn those around and get those to you guys hopefully by mid next week, since I know a lot of you are waiting on this webinar to determine if you need to sign your amendment agreement or not. With that, we can jump right in. So here's the agenda for today. These slides will be sent out after this, and this is being recorded and will be put up onto OCIO channel once again, hopefully mid next week. But just in case there's editing or formatting issues that need to happen, we can't guarantee a faster turnaround time on that. So let's go to the next one. So NOFA 7 grant recap. Once again, your NOFA 7 were funds allocated from the American Rescue Plan Act, particularly the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds to support the investment in broadband to design for that minimal service. Once again, that's 100 up, 100 down, and unlikely to be made using private sources of funds. Governor Reynolds allocated this money to OCIO to put out for NOFA 7. State of Iowa is the recipient of the CSLF funds. So state of Iowa is the recipient and has to report back to U.S. Treasury how they have spent all of these funds, how they have obligated these funds, and then do quarterly status reporting. That's the same quarterly status reports that all of you get from Maggie and all of those questions that we ask. Once again, we are only trying to collect the information that we need to give out to U.S. Treasury and that we need to make sure that the project is running. We are not trying to ask you any additional information that's not needed. We know your time is very valuable, and we know that this reporting can sometimes be cumbersome, especially when U.S. Treasury changes up the reporting requirements on us. But as soon as we get those reporting requirements changed, we try to get that information out to you as soon as possible. So that is State of Iowa was the recipient. You then entered into an agreement with the Office of the Chief Information Officer with your NOFA 7 grant agreement, and that made you then the subrecipient of the SLRF. Subrecipient is a word that is used there particularly because you could have been a contractor, but that would have had additional requirements placed upon you, and we would have had issues regarding ownership of the structure. If you are working with a municipality or a local jurisdiction, you might be considered a contractor there, especially if it is a different type of network. But just know that we had to make a decision and everyone was decided to be a subrecipient. Next slide. So by executing your agreement, once again, you were deemed a subrecipient as defined by applicable laws. And then those applicable laws are any federal, state, foreign, and local laws, rules, regulations, codes, everything on there. Requirements are in place for your grant agreement, as well as any and all future amendments, changes, or additions to such law as the effective date of such change. That's in your grant agreement, and thankfully, U.S. Treasury has listened to a lot of individuals and a lot of companies and state broadband offices, showing that how they originally had the UST for broadband was a lot more cumbersome and unknown, and also just not the way that this industry works. So I do want to thank you all for sharing those concerns with us. Anytime I'd been at any trade organization, I took your guys' concerns and brought it, and anytime U.S. Treasury would listen to me talk, I would let them know what we were seeing going on in the field. And I am not humorous enough to say that anything that I said got through to them, but a lot of the stuff that we did talk about and others were talking about was what was reflected in the new guidance. So I do want to say thank you for being honest and sharing those concerns with us. That's what allow for this future amendment and changes to happen. So just the list of all the stuff that RSM and OCIO has to constantly read and bring to you to make sure that we are having everything be in compliance. Treasury's final rule, Treasury's reporting guidance on these funds, the FAQs that Treasury answers but also sends out to states, the applicable provisions of 2 CFR. So that is, once again, all the federal funds and how Office of Management and Budget have said that they have to be spent and how they have to be reported on. The new SLRF supplementary broadband guidance that changed this, and then any future amendment changes or additions. So looking at what is the current state of your program, if you were getting ready to submit for a final reimbursement, this is kind of all the steps that RSM and OCIO are reviewing to get it to you. First thing is we would have to review your procurement policy and make sure that your procurement policy is documented and consistent with all the state, local, tribal, and other regulations as identified in 317 through 327. And then that all of your policy actually complies with the procurement standards of 2 CFR Part 200. And then for each individual procurement, we would have to go through and see your procurement source. So did you go out to bid, sole source, change order something, whatnot. And then your proof of order, so must be in the period of obligation, that March 3rd of 2021 through September 30th of 24. The proof of purchase that was within the period of performance, and then your proof of payment with the period of performance. There was a lot of documentation that you all would have to give to us when you were closing out your grant and requesting your final reimbursement. And that was very cumbersome and allowed for a lot of back and forth between RSM and you to make sure we were getting the proper documentation. Reason why was this has until 2031 to get audited by US Treasury. They will come in, pick something from a random sample, go through, and all of that documentation would need to be there, and they don't really give you a chance to cure the project. If we were lucky enough that we got a chance to cure, we would then have to go back to you and request what was the way you procured something. And if this was 2031, we would say, what was it that you were trying to procure in 2021? So every time RSM's asking you for something, please also remember that it's because we are trying to set up and be ready for our audit of OCIO of how they spent these funds. And we don't know when that audit's going to come. We just know it's between 26 and 2031. But good news is we have a new standards in place from the amendment. So move on to the next one. So here are the amendment changes to the grant agreement. So your period of performance, it's still March 3rd of 2021, but items purchased before March 3rd of 21 are allowable expenses as long as they would have been allowed under the grant agreement. Example of this would be fiber is a great one. If you went out in 2020 because you were part of NOFA 5 or 6, or were just purchasing it because you saw that it was going to be really hard to get fiber, that's great. Unfortunately, the old way, it penalized you, because if that was in your inventory prior to March 3rd of 21, it was not allowed. That was one thing Treasury heard people talk about a lot. So they went and said, hey, we know you probably have a lot of inventory that you want to use. As long as it would be allowable under the grant, we will allow for that to happen. That does not mean that I'll use alcohol as an example. Alcohol is never allowed under 2 CFR 200. So it doesn't matter if it was purchased before March 3rd of 21 or after March 3rd of 21, it would always be disallowed. So we still do have to do some testing there, but this opens up a lot of inventory or a lot of engineering services or anything that was purchased prior to this, as long as we can show that it would be an allowable expenditure after March 3rd of 21. procurement changes. No procurement documentation will be required. This is the biggest one, in my opinion, that changed. Um, the industry doesn't really have a procurement set up the same way as what 2 CFR and US Treasury has in the past. And the reason why was because a lot of you have been working with the same engineers or the same boards, same GCs for 30 years. And you know that you are getting the best pricing because you're still comparing it back and forth, but you don't go out to that full sealed bid package. You don't go out to get quotes on every single thing because you know this person's available during this construction season. We need to get out there and start digging and laying the fiber, or we're going to run into winter, we're going to run into frost, or they're going to get so busy that it's going to delay it for a whole nother construction cycle. So that's the biggest change here. By moving it over to this fixed amount subaward, we no longer are looking at procurement. So we don't need to see your sealed bid packages. We don't need to see why you chose company A over company B. That is no longer allowed. If for whatever reason you had a reimbursement with us and you got denied funding for that, if you agree to your amendment change, that allows for that finding to go away as well. And so we would open up any reimbursements that were potentially closed and allow for additional funds to be released if that was the reason why you were getting dinged. Affordable Connectivity Program. So NOFA 7 was introduced under the interim final rule of the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. The Affordable Connectivity Program did not exist at that time. The final rule, when it came out, the ACP did exist, and it required any grant agreements that went into place after the final rule. You, as the ISP, have to agree to be a part of the Affordable Connectivity Program. In our research of changing from the pre-interim final rule under NOFA 7 to this new rule using the broadband supplement guidance, we did come to the conclusion that the ACP, we did have to follow that. So if you are going to the affordable connectivity or to the new amendment to take benefit of procurement changes and period of performance, you do need to go through and apply to the ACP. Ownership of infrastructure is now going to be monitored differently. So in the past, it was under the original grant, you just had to show us that you were using the broadband the way it was supposed to, and it was 100 up, 100 down. That was kind of it. And then if you were going to sell the asset, there is a 2 CFR program of how section that says how you dissolve the asset and do any final distributions. Now what it is basically Treasury's coming in and saying, hey, we need to actively be told if something is going to happen. So there are new federal rules in accordance with that. If you're having questions about that, please reach out to us. Some of you already have. We hopefully will have answers here soon, especially those that are using RUS funding on how to deal with the first claim lien that Treasury has put out. Treasury has not put out the documents yet on the first claim lien, but they know of the issue, and we are in active communication with them to see how we deal with that. And then annual reviews of financial statements. Under the previous NOFA 7, the reviews of financial statements were going to happen at the end because majority of you are for-profit subrecipients. You aren't subject to the single audit rules. So that's the reason why we have a more robust subrecipient monitoring. However, now Treasury is saying that we do have to do annual reviews of financial statements. I'm not using the word audit because it is not necessarily an audit. We are working on how are we going to do that. It very well could be as simple as just you uploading your financial statements from the previous years to us and RSM doing calculations on liquidity ratio. Really, the only thing that we are requesting your financials for is we want to make sure that the projects keep on happening. So far, all the ones of you that we have talked to on that, you guys are in great financial health. That's the reason why we OCIO also set up the advance payment. We want to get you the cash and the liquidity to make sure that the projects are moving forward. So I'm not really worried about that, but it's just a new checkbox and test procedure that RSM has to do to be in compliance with the U.S. Treasury.
And Joel, we have a question asking, is
Yep.
there a specific period of the year that these annual reviews would need to take place?
So that's a good question. The answer right now is no. And so what I think it probably will be is just we will set up a quarterly status report to ask if your last year, one, to figure out when your fiscal year is, and then to when do you, if you receive an audit, basically if you are getting an audit, if you just send us your audit, that's all we need, because we'll be able to review that. And I know a majority of you guys are using ForViz. We are agnostic on provider. We do not care who your provider is. But if you send us your audit or a review of your financials, that's going to have a lot of the information in there. If you do not have a review or an audit of your financials, if you send us your financial statements, probably around the same time that you are sending them to your bank for if you have a loan for any covenant that you have to do with your loan, that would be a good time to send to us. So that is still one of the test steps that we are developing of how do we have you give them to us. But once again, all we're going to do with that is see if you have enough liquidity to complete your project.
And how many years will we need to report the annual financial statements?
It's until your project closeout. So if you're going to go through 2026, it would go through 2026.
Great. Those are all the questions right now.
Yeah. Once we close out, you'll still have reporting that's obviously due that we have to report back to U.S. Treasury, but it's more of did the asset sell, did the asset transfer, any of the stuff on the ownership of infrastructure. But the closeout for you to receive your final distribution and reimbursement, then that monitoring is going to obviously change because your project's up and running. We see that you're delivering the service to those that have contacted you to set up connection to the house, and then everything going from there. But once again, we'll still probably have monitoring, all depending on what U.S. Treasury wants, but I'm assuming it's going to be stuff that you're already giving OCIO, especially if you go into any new territories regarding mapping and then status of the infrastructure. So move on to, so that's what's changing. Here's the administration process that does not change. So your cost share, so what have you agreed to on your cost share? That's still going to be applicable. So if we're OCIO is funding 60%, you would still need to do your 40%, and it would still be on a reimbursement basis. Cost review, because it's still going to be on a reimbursement basis, we still need to see the invoice that you're requesting reimbursement and that it's been paid, so a payment verification. That and really gets back to all of the other NOFAs that OCIO has ran in the past. So if you've done NOFAs 1 through 6, it should feel more like that in the documentation required from NOFAs 1 through 6. Period of performance, we do need a certification. We'll work with you all on what the certification looks like. At the end of the performance period, that the broadband project and activities have been completed. Basically, we need some sort of documentation to show that you are delivering 100 up, 100 down to the areas you are supposed to be servicing. We know we are not forcing anyone to buy your product. That's not good free market or even realistic. But so just because we might not have someone at that one location to test against, that is where we do want to figure out a way to certify that you have delivered the services that you were supposed to deliver to. I am assuming from how Treasury's put this out here too, they will be the ones putting out a certification standard, but expect that closer to 24 through 26. Progress monitoring, RSM will still be working with you all throughout the period of performance to answer questions, do the reimbursement testing, collect the quarterly status report, and then report everything to Treasury and make sure that it's as smooth as possible for everyone. And then payment reviews. Grantee, you may be delayed or rejected if you have not made substantial progress that correlates with the funding received to date. This really shouldn't be an issue since we still are doing the 2 draws, an advance payment and reimbursement at closeout. But just for everyone's sake, that this is potentially on the advance payment side, if we see that you haven't done anything or moved forward on something, that might be a potential rejection or delay. I do not see that as an issue from looking at all of your quarterly status reports and talking with a lot of you individually, but just wanted to put that in there. Next slide. So quarterly status report changes. As I said, as the UST continues to change any of the requirements that OCIO and the state of Iowa is, we will continue to input that from you all. You're the best information and holder of all that information. So anytime you do see a change in the QSR, just know that once again, it's coming from UST. One of the biggest ones are submitting addresses that are or will be associated with the broadband project. Address and location should correspond to information that may exist on planning or as-built network engineering documents. So this is that kind of key thing of as you're building out and as you're going to engineer, as you're running past the farmhouses and past the rural buildings, it's easier obviously in town, but we do need to start tracking, hey, who has the potential to buy into this network and have a hookup? Obviously, we can't make a farmer who is not interested in buying something past their house to hook up, but that was what this whole grant agreement was designed for, was to try to bring it to them. So we brought it to them. They haven't necessarily purchased it. That doesn't flag it for anyone, but we do need to report back to Treasury, who is then using this to report back to FCC, saying, yes, that person has access to internet, 100 up, 100 down. They've just chosen not to have it. And then review, edit, and confirm the location data sent to grantees on August 30th and upload with your quarterly report. If you have any questions on this, do not hesitate to reach out to us through your correspondence tab. We'll be more than happy to answer your question or jump on the call, walk you through what this is. OCIO did a first crack at trying to get that information and go from that Census Bureau level data to the actual address. But we need your help to verify that information and edit and confirm. If you need any guidance on that, once again, do not hesitate to reach out. So just so that you guys all see kind of what's going on, timeline-wise, we had May 17th, 23, the new guidance dropped. We reviewed the guidance, asked back to Treasury a lot of questions showing them, here's how NOFA 7 was set up, specifically under that interim final rule, what needs to change. We had robust discussions in-house about what needs to change, came to the agreement, adopted those changes, and then sent that out for you all to review, and then having them be due September 30th, 23. Correspondence, once again, Iowa Grants is our system of record. When U.S. Treasury potentially audits these funds until 2032, what we are planning on doing is giving them view-only access to Iowa Grants so they can see everything from your application to advance payments, reimbursement testing, all the information under the reimbursement testing, and then all of the correspondence underneath it where they can see why we made the decision that we made, both you as the grantee, RSM as the subrecipient monitors, and then OCIO as the individuals paying out to you all. So we do ask you, once again, try to put everything in there. If we jump on calls, you will notice that Maggie is taking vigorous notes about our calls, and we send that and put that in there too, so that Treasury can see that we were doing everything to make you guys all aware of the information we had at that time. And then just know that if Treasury changes their mind, we will roll with punches, and we will also go and change and work with you all too. So once again, can't emphasize this enough. Please, please, please make sure you are using Iowa grants as your correspondence tool with us. Next slide. So correspondence training, just as a fun, friendly refresher, click on your single sign-on tool. If you do need help with that, you can email the Iowa grants email, and Maggie is monitoring that, and we can get you that sign-on. Go to your select grants, and then select the applicable grant that you are working on. If you are asking a generic question about if you have more than one grant, you can ask the generic question to just the top one, and we'll get it, and we know how to apply that to all the other ones. If it is very specific to a grant, specifically if it's your quarterly status report, if you have a question about that grant, please make sure you are tagging it to that grant. So you select the grant that you're on, you go to correspondence, add grantee correspondence right there, or reply to the one that you have selected. And then this is the kicker. Please make sure you always add RSM Program Manager in the to field. We get emails and notifications saying someone has sent you a question. The reason why we get those is because in the to field, you put RSM Program Manager. If you don't send us that, it just sits out there and no one got notified. We do on Fridays try to go through and click on each grant to see if there is something that's randomly sitting out there. But there's over 120 grants. So just know that that does take time. Our team, we are committed to trying to turn around and answer you guys' questions in 48 hours, if not sooner, or at least even acknowledging received. For those that have sent in their amendments, you should have been receiving the received email almost right away. But add a subject, draft your message, attach any files if needed, and then send correspondence. Next, and that's it. So got through that in 30 minutes. We'll open up the Q&A and see if we have any questions there.
Yeah, we have one right now. It's if we do sign the amendment, do you want the year-end 2022 audits?
Yes, please. Yep, so 2022 will be the first year. Well, some of you potentially signed it in 21. We would basically need your financial statements for the life of the grant. So from the original sign date to current, please upload that. And we will, I'm more worried about the quarterly status report. So after that is due in October, we'll send you, especially if you have signed on to the new agreement, and the amendment, we will send a follow-up of, hey, thank you for sending the amendment. Here's the information we need, specifically the Affordable Connectivity Program too. We'll go out and check FCC, but if you have already adopted it, just showing us what you're doing and how you're implementing the ACP.
And I think in part that answers the next question of how would we provide those materials through the correspondence portal or wait till it's requested?
Yep, that'll be the correspondence portal right now. There is a audit, and when I'm saying audit, I'm saying financial statements, just in case you do a review or have an agreed upon procedure or whatever way you use your financial statements. There is a portion of Iowa grants that has that. We just don't have it active because we weren't using it until the end, and it's easier for the whole closeout. But it'll be very similar to correspondence and quarterly status report of here is a place to upload and for it to live in Iowa grants.
Those are all the questions at the moment, so we can give it a few more minutes here to see if anything else comes through.
While we're waiting, I can tell you also, I have been flying all over the country, attending a lot of broadband meetings for broadband development offices and for U.S. Treasury and Department of Commerce for BEAD. I do want to just thank you all. You guys are very nice. In all of your correspondence to us and everything, you guys understand that OCIO is here and RSM is here to try to help solve the broadband issue. Not every ISP is as understanding as Iowans and some of the outlining states. I'll put that in with you guys too. So just thank you. You do make Maggie and my life a lot easier, and we enjoy working with Iowa ISPs. And that's me being both an Iowan and from Des Moines, but also just working with others outside of the Midwest. Any other questions coming in, Maggie?
If the amendment is not accepted, what are the changes in the reporting process?
So the changes in the reporting process, we will still do everything how it's currently stated. So we would still have to do a full procurement policy review. We would still have to do testing for anything that's prior to March 3rd of 21. And then when we report to Treasury, we will be reporting that you are not following that. But any of the additional stuff we still have to report. So you would still not be required to be part of the Affordable Connectivity Program. That really is the only big change. But any additional requirements on reporting we would still have to do, such as the address location. That is not because of this new guidance. That is Treasury is saying, because that language that we put up first, that's the same language Treasury gave the state of Iowa, that by accepting these grant dollars, you are also any future applicable laws and reporting. So you would still have to do the address things there. So nothing on the quarterly status report would be different for you. It would just be how do you get the funds would be what is the difference portion.
Can you touch on the federal ownership interests?
Yeah, so let me go pull up that part of the guidance. And Maggie, I don't know if you have that in front of you either. If
I do
not,
not.
okay, I will send it over to you because I want you to pull it up so we can all
Yes.
read it. Yep, so in your cover letter, you should have received the link to the Treasury guidance. And as Maggie is getting ready to pull that up, Maggie, it's midway of page 3 down to page 4. So uniform guidance sets up fourth property standards for property acquired or improved by a federal award. And so that's the stuff that we were already taking and working with you guys on. And it's a different way and it's more at your closeout. That's an issue. But instead of applying the full uniform guidance, they came back and said for both SLRF or Capital Projects Fund. So if you guys are looking at NOFA 8, that is a NOFA 8 issue. Once again, not something I can talk about on here. So title to the real property or equipment acquired or improved upon the federal award, NOFA 7. Vest in the ISP and subject to the condition that for the duration of the federal interest period, the ISP and any successors or transfers. So if you sell or transfer your network to someone else, here is everything that must be followed. So basically, it is making sure that you're keeping it at 100 up, 100 down. And if there is a number 3, must participate in the federal programs and provide low-income consumers with subsidies on the broadband internet access service. So if there's an ACP or something like the ACP, that you or your successor must do that through the federal interest period, which is 2035. Let me go and look at it. It's in here. December 31st, 2034. It's actually in the paragraph right above the title to real property. So basically through 2034, here's your federal interest period. And then you must maintain records of real property that include the indication of the applicable federal interest and going through the rest of that. If you have not, I would suggest you, once again, reach out to anyone that's giving you counsel, either your lawyer or if you have a broadband grant counsel that has been following all of this, have them read through this. If you scroll down, the big takeaway that's been trapping up a lot of people is this first, ISPs may encumber the project property if Treasury receives a shared first lien position in that property standards. This is the portion that's been causing some hiccups, and OCIO and RSM is working with US Treasury and USDA to figure out, hey, if a federal interest has already been applied because we have an RUS and the USDA is the one funding it, how do we do that? So that question has been raised. I can tell you that Treasury is wanting to do everything to make sure that things happen and move on. So I think we're close to getting something between those two. But if you do have any questions on that, once again, reach out to your legal counsel and reach out to RUS if you are using USDA.
We have another question asking for clarification on procurement. So we're asking, do you still need to keep your procurement policy in place and available for review? And if that's the case, then what is meant by no procurement documentation is required if you sign the amendment?
So, yep, if you just have a NOFA 7, we don't need to look at your procurement policy. We don't need to, we do not care what you do with it. I will just say that if you're looking at any other federal projects or federally funded projects, there probably will be a procurement policy requirement there. So getting rid of it, I mean, that is a management decision that I can tell you on, but like RSM will no longer be requesting your procurement policy or reviewing it. So if you have one on file with us, we won't delete it because we can't delete any records, but we won't be referring back to it when we are doing our reimbursement testing. If you have signed the amendment. If you have not signed the amendment, we will be using your procurement policy as stated and reviewing all of those documentation.
That is all of the questions we have at the moment.
Perfect. As I said, thank you, everyone. If you do have any questions or follow-ups, do not hesitate to reach out to us through your correspondence portal. And if you have not already done so, please, and you agree to the process, please sign your amendment and send that over to OCIO.